Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Alex Avila with Love University, and we're back. I'm an author, psychologist, and speaker. Every week, we talk about how to love ourselves, others, and a higher nature, how to improve our finances, career, health, relationships, and spirituality. And we have a very interesting and fascinating guest today, Anthony David Vernon, who is a Cuban American literary writer who earned his master's degree in philosophy at the University of New Mexico. He's a regularly published author of poetry along with short stories and philosophical articles in various outlets. He was a Pushcart Prize nominee for Guilt is a Pleasure, and his premier book is The Assumption of Death. And he has a hybrid of work of poetry, short stories, philosophical musings. And his second book is entitled Flings on Flings. Welcome to the show, Anthony.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on and
Yes.
talk with someone who's done a lot of psychological work, because it's an interest of mine, but not something I'm formally studied in. But hope I can contribute to the conversation.
You have a very fascinating take on these things, and you're Cuban American. It's kind of similar to my background, but no hablo español ni un poquito, ¿no?
I speak enough to not, as I like to joke, not die in a Spanish-speaking country, but not enough to have a good conversation.
And go to the bathroom if you need to, so you're okay with it.
I can get a hotel and I can get out of there. So that's
okay. Got it. That's good. Now, your book, Flings on Flings, is very interesting. It's kind of an unusual or different take on love. Mm-hmm. And you talk about a fling. You say, what is a fling? And you say it is basically in the middle ground where love resides.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people think of fling as a short sexual encounter with hot feelings. So how do you define fling for us?
So I kind of contrast it first and foremost to something I call seduction. So seduction is the place where you would put a one-night stand where you have no interest in the individual aside from using them as an object. Mm-hmm. A fling is longer than that, where you are taking some interest in the person, you get to know them, and you get to understand them, but it doesn't have a permanence to it. So I think that this is where love resides, in a passion. I'm not a person who believes passion could be just something that happens in a snap. There has to be some time to be truly passionate about something, right? Like a good example of this would be in hiking, that a passionate hiker, they don't just get up the mountain in 1 minute, they take time to stop, they look around, those who truly enjoy it. So I think the fling is in that middle point of just like kind of the quick, one night stand, whatever, you're an object, but not the, sort of forever, happily ever after. I think if you're going to have that, you would need compassion.
Interesting. So, there are many definitions of love, and we'll get into all the different kinds, erotic, ludic, companionate, and so forth. And you have a lot of interesting philosophical background in the Greeks and others. Mm-hmm. Now, the term fling, again, you classify it as a shorter term relationship. It could involve feelings, perhaps, you're saying, but not like a long-term marriage or long-term kind of thing. Now, is your idea that we should have a society of flings and not marriages?
Yes, I think we should have a society of flings. However, I do think that you can have flings within marriages. This might sound very strange, but I do think while highly difficult, I think it is still possible to have flings within marriages, because ultimately I think the idea is to keep up a level of passion going on there, right? And I think
you're saying flings within your spouse, or flings outside of the marriage, like extramarital affairs?
Oh, I mean, either or. I think it just depends on what the individual wants for themselves. I'm not pro or anti monogamy. I am not pro or anti polyamory, et cetera. Whatever, relations work between individuals, as long as they're all consensual. But I think for me, it's more important about the feeling of passion. I think this often gets lost in the happy ever after, right? That like there's this settlement, and that's where these relationships begin to die. Where you're no longer really able to engage with someone like you used to, right? And I think it is possible to keep this sort of honeymoon phase going on for a very, very long period of time. But of course, that takes challenge and work. But I think people should be willing to put in that sort of work.
After you're a fairly young man, have you been in a relationship yourself, a long-term or short-term?
For me personally, I don't mind exposing this sort of stuff. My relationships are very, admittedly short, right? Okay. So I'm not the type of individual who goes out and, hooks up, even though I'm from Miami and been in that club scene and whatever. Right. For the most part, I do have, short but passionate relationships. And I'm currently, in one right now that I'm very happy with. And I'm not the type of person who's against, people doing long-term things for themselves, not even for myself necessarily. I just think the approach in how it should be done is not the way it is being done. I think the way we currently do it is very, cold, methodical, contractual, and doesn't leave a lot of space for the passions, which are the reasons we should be engaging in relationships in the first place.
Interesting. Because, there are the arranged marriages that appear to be successful in certain cultures, religious people who support it. And then we have American society is more based on romance and passion. So there's an international aspects to it. Now, you do say something interesting. You say romance doesn't require love. It can be heartless. And I think you're talking about, is that seduction where you can be the cultural player, or they can kind of, the ludic,
yes,
thinks of love as a game, and they can get, successes from that.
Yeah. It's the Don Juan of that's what romance is. It's that whole sort of, the going about the rituals that people desire, or if we want to put it in more modern terms, the rizzing, like how to properly, go about these sorts of things. Now, you could be genuinely romantic and you can be someone who actually likes these things and wants to do these things. But if we're talking, away from the psychology of it, romance is just simply the series of actions in a given society for the ends of courtship.
Interesting. Now, there's also an interesting gender component, because some people might say, well, males have a certain viewpoint, the seduction aspect, women are more long-term, emotional, and so forth. So I teach psychology at the colleges, and I always have this little quiz I give them, students. And if you get all three of these right, which they really do, I give you 15 credit points. Okay. So I'm going to give you 15 credit points. Okay. I'll ask you these questions. Okay. I want to hear your perspective.
Of course.
And this is kind of based on research. All right. So number one, Anthony, who falls in love faster, males or females?
Well, this is a part of the problem here. What are we also defining love as, right? Because, and this is the thing. I think also this is one of the things I want to move away from is that, gender and generalizing these sorts of terms, right? Like, I think that both men and women can equally be the person to approach, can equally be the person to love. Now, to not skirt away from your question, I would actually surprisingly say men.
You're right. 5 credit points.
Yeah.
Now, tell me why you think so, and I'll tell you what.
Yeah, I mean, in my personal opinion, and I do think it's because of men are individuals who want to capture, who want to genuinely have, and those who need to have, once they achieve something, they want to hold on to it, right? This seems to be a male stereotypical tendency.
Okay. Also, they say that males are more visual, so they can see a beautiful woman, and then maybe something about her voice or her look, he falls kind of in love with her. But women are more pragmatic. They want to know a lot more about a guy before they fall in love just with the physical side of things.
Yeah.
So that tends to be a pattern. Okay, another question here, Anthony. So far, you're doing good. Is who falls in love more frequently, males or females?
Well, I would personally, again, I think say for the same reasons, because I think men are willing to, go after the, this visual thing, this visual thing, this visual thing, or this interesting thing, so on and so forth. So yes, if we're stereotyping, for the most part, I would say men.
Incorrect.
Interesting.
Okay. This is where a lot of people fail, because basically it's females who fall in love more frequently, because a woman falls out of love faster. When she's done with a guy, she's done. She might have a cry with her friends, have chocolate party, and then go out and meet another guy.
Right.
But a guy, if he's really in love with her, he's going to linger. You ever see guys that call you at 1 a.m, oh, honey, he's drunk.
Oh, yeah. I have friends
they keep pursuing the woman. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, I've seen that with friends even.
If they really love her, not just a sexual encounter, they actually pursue and continue, and they linger more. Women can make a cleaner break, they say. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, I have seen it. Is just one question about are these self-reported when individuals, self-report that I fall in love like this, or I fall in love like this? Interesting.
Well, yeah, they do studies it's very interesting. But it kind of goes with the mindset, in terms of, falling out of love faster for females, so they can fall in love more frequently. Okay, last one here. Now, see if we can redeem yourself, Anthony.
Yes.
These are kind of semi-trick questions. Who is more romantic, males or females?
By the definition I use, given that it's a courtship definition, by default in Western societies, it would be men. However, women stereotypically in like media and culture have been stereotyped as preferring the symbols of romance, the chocolates, the flowers, the so on and so forth. So I think depending on how you define
Before you
it,
answer, stick with your gut. Stick with your gut.
I think my gut does say women.
Oh, but that's not your first answer. What was your first answer?
No, my first answer was women.
Oh, you were okay, but you started talking about men.
I did. Because again, I do want to talk about both because I'm very much someone who wants to get to the details of things. And
the answer is males. Now, this is interesting.
Yeah.
And the reason why is they say males tend to be more idealistic. The term romance, like they see the beautiful woman from far away, they fall in love with this, without really knowing who she is.
Right.
But a woman needs to know what's his bank account look like. Is he loyal? Is he faithful? How does he treat his grandma, his waiter? Does he want kids? So women have a lot more of a laundry list of events.
Right.
In terms of what they want. So they tend to be more pragmatic in terms of falling in love. And they take longer in that sense.
Right. Whereas the man will see something that he desires and will go about a courtship sort of gesture. He'll buy her flowers immediately or pay for an overpriced date or, whatever it may be.
Infatuation. Do you ever have that crush in high school or someone that was unattainable or something? Do you ever
honestly, I'm the type of person who's infatuated by a lot of things. I'm very much a romantic in my viewpoint, right? Like I can even be infatuated with a lovely view, and that sort of things.
Right, but I'm saying in terms of a person, do you ever have infatuation?
Oh, yeah, of course, included, of course.
Okay, but you never really even maybe talked to them or developed a relationship, but you had this image about them that may not have been real.
Yeah, I mean, being that personally I try to be an inventive and creative person, I can tend to do that with a lot of people, even those I do have relationships with. I very much am someone who enjoys my flights of fancy, and I'm okay with that. I think that knowing that about myself, I'm able to regulate.
I see. Your book is very fascinating. It really talks about, it's got poetry in it, it's got philosophical maxims and, little aphorisms and all. So, and you use songs. You have Tina Turner, What's Love Got to Do with It? And she's talking about basically the touch of your hand makes me, my pulse react. So that's kind of like the chemical attraction, right? The so-called infatuation. But then she talks about, it's a secondhand emotion, my heart can be broken. Yes. So can you explain that to us? How does that work in the real world?
So, I mean, at least for me, that the context in which I believe I use it is in regards to relationships, that like relationships themselves do not have to do with love, that you can have loveless relationships. I mean, as pointed to earlier about the arranged marriages, not to say that all arranged marriages are inherently loveless. It's just to say that many are not, or even many marriages or, relationships made initially out of love have nothing to do with them. But in regards to, I guess what Tina Turner's pointing to with love being the secondhand emotion, at least for me, I'd point to that like passion of chemicality is a weird way to put it. But, that the chemical passion is the thing that comes foremost. And that's the emotion that then feeds into love. And love does not necessarily have to do with passion. Now, I would firmly disagree with that sort of take. I think the two are inherently locked in together. So I do have a tendency and do sometimes enjoy taking things out of their context to use for creative purposes. But that being said, yes, if we're going through the full lyrics of Tina Turner, I inherently disagree because I think that love is a byproduct of passion, that you can't separate one from the other in the same way that, fumes are a byproduct of driving your car, right? You can't just drive your car and, just magically hope that there are going to be no fumes unless you drive an electric car, but that, you cannot, that passion is always going to yield and result in some sort of love because love is just what passion is pointed at. Love is the object that passion attaches onto. There is no just blind, nebulous, in the air, empty passion.
Yeah, now you've heard of Sternberg. He did the triangular theory of love, where he talks about different elements that combine for different kind of love. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, commitment only is the empty marriage you mentioned, also arranged marriages. Intimacy only is liking, like you have a good friend. Passion only, it could be a one-night stand, friends with benefits, or whatever you call it, flings. And then most people want to have a combination: intimacy, passion, and commitment.
Yes.
But you're not sure about the commitment side. You like the intimacy and the passion, you're saying.
Yeah, well, I think actually that's the funny thing. Actually, I think you can very much have a fling with someone that you're not intimate with necessarily. right?
Intimacy, like you don't like them. I mean, it's not like you don't have a friendship.
No. Intimacy in regards to physical intimacy, I thought, is what you were pointing to.
Okay.
But
Well, no, the way he
regards,
defines it, intimacy is friendship.
but
That's different. Yeah.
yes, but in that sort of regard, also, yeah, I think that can also be true, right? That you can have a short, knowing relationship without even liking someone, in the same way you can have a long,
Right.
knowing relationship without liking someone.
Right. But in fling, the way you describe it, you want to have intimacy, which Sternberg defines as friendship, like emotional connection. You want to have the sexual element, but then the commitment, maybe not, right? Is what you're saying.
No, I think actually I
mean, long-term commitment, like 100
yeah,
years or 50
yeah,
years.
Yeah. So I very much detest breaking outside of agreements in relationships. Again, even if you're in a polyamorous dynamic, if someone is not beholden to those agreements, then they are cheating, and I do not personally take kindly to that. I don't recommend it, because what is the point of engaging with someone on certain terms without engaging on those terms in agreement? Because then you're just using and taking advantage of someone, and obviously I don't want to be taken advantage of, used on, if we're going the most basic golden rule route with this. And we can name a billion other sort of reasons. But I think going back to the friendship stuff, for me, I actually hold friendship in a higher regard than love, right? And I think when you can be friends with someone you love, that is even better. When you could be friends with someone you are married to, that's even, better. There's this idea that, friendships have to lack the physical intimacy, the physical touch, and all that sort of stuff. And that's understandable. Like, people don't necessarily want to conflate the two in certain situations. But I think in many situations, the two should go hand in hand and actually may have better results. You want to be able to be in a relationship with someone that you can treat as a friend otherwise.
Okay, good. Now, Anthony, how would you find, love has many different viewpoints, and how would you define love romantically? Can you give me like one phrase, and then we can go back on that a little bit later?
Yeah, I think romantic love is just passion pointed at another person.
Okay. Passion. Now, passion, is that sexual passion, or could be passion about just the joyfulness of being there with a person?
No, I think the best type of passion I like to think about is when you come around the bend of a hike and you see a beautiful waterfall and you're like, whoa, like that is the sort of passion I'd like to speak to the most.
Rapturous, I guess they call it, right? Something
yes
beautiful, like it makes you feel joyful, kind of thing.
Yes.
Hey, excellent. Now, the other thing that's interesting, you talk about the rose-colored lenses, and you say that romantic passion fades, and then you lose that, they're no longer perfect as you thought, and you find the flaws, and that's when relationships go bad.
Yes.
But there's actually a psychologist, you may have heard of Gottman. Have you heard of his work? He does a lot of good work with marriage couples. He videotapes them. He looks at their physiological signs. And what he found is actually that the couples that do best long-term, that are happy, maintain the rose-colored glasses. They actually see their mate in an unrealistically positive light. Like, he's funny, she's intelligent. And, they actually do better. So isn't that good to have that if you can? Keep those rose-colored glasses?
That's what I'm agreeing with. That the tendency tends to be not that the rose-colored lenses stay on, it's that they sign contracts with the rose-colored lenses stay on, right? So it's this idea that, like, it is good to have these rose-colored lenses. They're fun. Rose-colored lenses are cool. I mean, look at how Elton John can rock them. It's just more along the lines of that people make the contracts with the rose-colored lenses on, and then they take them off, and they're still in those same contracts. I think it is best to keep the rose-colored lenses on. I like the rose-colored lenses. They look good. They look cool. So I'm completely agreeing with that sort of.
When you say contract, you're talking about marriage in a sense? When you say
and not necessarily marriage necessarily, because I think we're kind of in a day and age where relationships are very contractual, and I think this is a good thing in many regards. Like, verbal consent is a very good thing to enter our society and enter our lexicon. But nonetheless, it is very contractual. It's like, yes, I agree to this. Yes, I agree to this. I mean, when 50 Shades of Grey came out, this is like the naughtiest of all the naughty sex books. And even then, you have like a literal physical contract going through all the details. And this was seen as like a symbol of, like, sexiness, right? Like, if we would have made this movie 50 years ago, they just would have started doing stuff, and
But
there
you
would
want
have
people
been
to
that
be
contraction.
upfront and honest. Like, in my seminars, I call it the dating masquerade. People have on a mask,
Mhm.
that, covers their true personality. They're trying to impress the person, but then the mask comes off, and then you're often incompatible and not happy. So
Yeah.
you're saying take off the mask initially, and then do the contract or whatever it is you're talking about.
Yes. That's a complete agreement, right? That one should be upfront with themselves. But what tends to, I think, happen is that we are in a day and age where people are in contractual deals, right? They may date someone for, aesthetic reasons to look good on Instagram. I mean, there's this whole sort of trend where it's like people like sort of like shadow reveal their like boyfriends or girlfriends, and like, they try to use other people as like, objects and symbols to get something out. And I think it's better to just be open and honest with ourselves, so that way when we are coming to these sort of longer term agreements, we are coming as ourselves, not as a sign that we have worn.
I see. Now, in terms of generational aspects, I don't know if you're a millennial or what your range is, but you say as people get older, they may change perhaps the perception. Maybe younger, they want flings. Maybe older, they want companionship. Maybe they want whatever it is, family, kids, what they call legacy, right? Do you see that changing in people's lives as they get older? Do they maybe change some of their priorities?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to give some context, so I was born in '97.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm 25. So
Okay.
I
So
kind of,
you're the Generation Y or something, or what are
I
you?
really don't care number wise. I think for me personally, like I'm in just as the person I am, I'm someone who's very able to, I've referenced like Instagram a couple of times here, but simultaneously, like, I will read like a lot of Nietzsche,
Right.
Aristotle,
You're like an old soul
whoever.
in some ways, they call you.
Yeah, but I kind of try my best to straddle, right? Like I want to know what everyone's kind of up to, and I think all the lexicon's
So you're
important.
going to be flinging at 50 years of age, you think?
I think so too. But I think that's a personal thing, right? So, I mean, yes, there may be generational tendencies, but I think these generational tendencies weren't explored in honesty, right? Because I think the expectation and the automatic expectation was to have these long-term monogamous arrangements. And I think with the invention of birth control, especially, I mean, this has been a thing for a while, but especially with that, we have been put in a liberating sort of regard where, yes, there are still STDs and obviously these things need to be tracked, but for the most part, in terms of, having that risk of, formulating a child and having that responsibility, we have a more honest means to explore what we actually want out of our relationships. And it's no coincidence that the sexual revolution coincided very closely with the invention of birth control. So it's just to say that I think we haven't taken advantage of this exploration yet, and a lot of people still assume the automatics. But I think before we can answer what we should do, as a generation, I think it's important for individuals to answer for themselves. And then once we realize the conclusions that individuals are coming up with collectively, then we can, explore the implications and see where we want to go. But as of right now, I think the automatic implication is still dominant. I think we are still behaving too much like albatrosses as opposed to the mammalian species that we are.
You're quite a very thought-spoken gentleman, you are. The way you expound things philosophically, I can see, which is kind of cool. But you're also kind of a cool guy. I can see you're kind of easygoing in some ways.
Thank you.
You like to enjoy life, right?
Oh, I try my best.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I'm thinking about is you talk about familiarity versus unfamiliarity. You said that's more exciting. The passion, getting to know the person, you don't know who they are. But you said once familiarity sets in, people, I guess, become bored, and the marriages and all that stuff ends. On the other hand, there are people. I don't know if you know about the personality type, Jungian types, Myers-Briggs, they're what we call security seeker types that actually like comfort, they like predictability, stability. For them, actually, that's wonderful. To have the 9 to 5, meal at a certain time, make love a certain way. So do you see that in terms of differences in personality types, in terms of what they like?
Yeah, I think I account for it. I can't remember what term I used to account for it, but they like their corners, right? I think there are individuals out there who like their corners, and I think that's fine. But I think the problem is that too many people are getting shoved in their corners and are just accepting familiarity. I think the majority tendency is a lot more open-ended than society gives credit for. I think a lot more people are being shoved into those corners than actually want them. Of course, that type exists, and that's good on them. But they think even that person that's shoved into the corner should still be passionate about the things that are in their corner. And you see a lot of people that are corner people also having this like questioning that too at the same time. So I think the main issue at hand, and this might sound annoying to say because of how many German idealists use it, but the whole authenticity, and it's not that's not necessarily wrong, but it's more so if people can realize their true comfortability. And I think given that we're in a day and age where there's a lot of conflicting messages, like, oh, you gotta do this, but you also gotta do that, you have to be this, and you have to be this, and just the amount of messages are also growing. I think people aren't as good as taking the time to sit back and settle to see what they want. And for me, I think the main reason I wrote this thing is not to necessarily destroy the nuclear family or anything of that sort. It's just to explore another option for those who may think they have to do the nuclear family, but may not have to, or et cetera, other things.
Right. You were saying, so you're kind of out of the box thinker, exploring other avenues and giving people the options, I guess, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing is interesting is that the idea of unconditional love has got many terms: agape, karuna, which is compassion, or bhakti, love. Often, you think of a higher power, nature, God, and so forth, that infuses you with that. Now, we see unconditional love many times with a parent and a young child.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, they're wonderful. Of course, when they get to be teenagers, the things may change, correct? And then a human and a dog, right, or animal, right? You see the unconditional love. But then adult relationships, we don't see it as much. Mm-hmm. The so-called perfect love, the spiritual side. So what's your take on that? Is there unconditional love in human adults or in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, this is my mom's least favorite section of this work.
Does she believe in that or no?
No, she very much disagrees. She thinks unconditional love is a thing where I don't think it can exist, because I think all love has to exist within conditions. And I mean, the most basic condition is one, existence. So like love exists within, the laws of like the cosmos, et cetera, et cetera. Then love obviously exists in a time and place, and love exists directed towards a particular other, So I think love always exists in conditions, right? The condition of a mother's love towards their kids is largely due to the fact that they are her kids. That doesn't mean that mother is incapable of loving other people. I mean, I'm someone who, plans on when I get older to adopt. That's like, that I don't want to have my own, but I do want to adopt. So I'm not saying that love cannot be directed at something that is not your own, but nonetheless, like the condition that I will love my adopted kids is largely the fact that they are my adopted kids and not anyone else's. So I think, you can't prevent but being in conditions. There's no such thing as unconditioned. All things are conditional.
How about the thing that no matter what you do, they still love you? Does your dog still love you no matter what you do?
So if we're talking about endless love, I think that is possible, but very difficult, right? So I do think it's possible to have this unending passion, but it has to be like re-sparked. So
for adult human relationships, you're saying?
Yeah. I think it's true I think like for dogs, adults, humans, etc. Right? It's just one of those things where a good example of this is in order to do these sorts of things, it's like you have to keep on cooling wax as you're burning wax to keep a candle going and have like the wick going. So I guess it's a weird metaphor of like you have this endless wick, but in order to keep it burning, you have to keep on creating wax to go around it, and you have to be a constant wax maker around it. You have
to give your dog a bone, otherwise he won't love you. Is that the idea?
It's not about giving a bone necessarily. So I'm talking about the individual and how they keep it up for themselves, right? I don't think anyone can make anyone else fall in love with them. I think that's a ridiculous notion. I think you're the only one that can control your own sort of love. So I think, but in order to do these sorts of things, right, you have to keep it going. And I think ultimately, endless love, I think, is pretty much, pretty much a practical impossibility. Because, even when you're driving or taking a shower, you're not focused on the passion you have towards somebody else. So I think more accurately, it's better to think of love as like a matchbox and just be ready to, light the match when you need to.
You just cost all the millions of dollars for all the romantic writers, right? Of the songs, all the music in the world.
Well, I love referencing music in this book a lot. I think I reference probably more music than anything else. Because I think, oddly enough, that lyricists are the most underrated of poets, certainly, and they may be underrated psychologists in a phenomenological sense. Like they're very much able to touch upon the experience of things, like a phenomenological psychology. Of course, not a psychiatry by any means. I'm not going to get my psychiatry from iron and wine, but you can understand the passion and experience of love through a lot of songwriting.
So you have a lot of interesting paradigms and paradoxes and reversals. I think one of your other works, I was looking a little bit at it, you talk about the assumption of death, that we assume that we're going to die, and by thinking you're immortal, that can actually change things. It's a certain thing. So I'm wondering if you're doing the same thing. Assumption of love is that most people assume that love is a component, and it doesn't have to be. Is that kind of where you're going with this?
Yeah, you caught on that very well. Yeah, because I like to go a little harder with Nietzsche. Nietzsche talked about doing philosophy with a hammer, and I think about doing it more with a sledgehammer, because something Nietzsche didn't account for is that there's different types of hammers, right? You have your hammers that are better for building, but for me, I'm more of a sledgehammer type of philosopher, where I want to smash assumptions, and I don't want to build necessarily anything in their place. It's just more along the lines of, okay, now that you have the rubble, what are you going to do, as an individual? And so for me, it's like, I just want to knock some holes in the walls of love and see if people still want to keep their structures, or if they want to finish the job for themselves.
Yeah, you say something like, most people say life is short and love is eternal, but you're saying love can be short and life is eternal.
Yes.
So reversing that. But then I'm thinking, though, a lot of people, when they think of immortality, you talk about a legacy, and love could be considered a legacy. The love you have for your people you leave behind, the love you invest in your work. So wouldn't that make you immortal itself? So in a sense, death and love are connected.
Yeah. I think there's some validity to that for sure. But I think the love can often be the things you do over that span of immortality. So, for example, like Dostoevsky is immortal for his works, but his works are only so long, right? In the sense that each work that he ever produced is a passion in of itself, and the works themselves are not immortal. It is, in terms of their length, and the passion is certainly not immortal. The passion he had in writing those works. The immortality is the way that passion has lasted, and has kept itself carrying over, and has granted new passion to others. There's a lot of Dostoevsky nerds out there for sure, for good reason.
You're a little bit like Khalil Gibran. Have you heard of him before?
No, I actually have not.
Tremendous Lebanese poet. At 18, he was writing about eternal love. He never experienced it, but he was able to channel somehow all these wonderful, mature things.
Was he a Sufi?
He may have studied. That's from the East.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of a lot of the Sufi writers. I have Rumi referenced a lot in my work.
Rumi is all that. Now, you do have some interesting points here. You talk about a long marriage equals long conversation, not necessarily long love. And it is true, like if the passion does fade, the sexual passion, then what you have is a companion, right? Someone you talk to. And then you said you can't tolerate them anymore, and that could be a divorce. So in your mind, if you were to be a dating coach, would you advise find someone you really can talk good with? Is that
that would be the first and foremost thing, and I'd emphasize that at the beginning and the end and the
middle. Not sexual passion? No,
I think conversation is more important.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they may not be physically attractive as you like, but they have great conversation. You would go with that.
Yes, I think that's more important. For some people, I think you can't eliminate the sexual aspect. For me personally, like it's not the foremost thing for me, but for other people, yeah, it certainly is. And that can't be eliminated. But I would tell them, it's like, okay, don't be with someone that you are just physically intimate with. Like you have to be able to have a conversation with the individual, because even a person that you're just physical with, you're going to spend more time talking to them. There's a reason why the term pillow talk exists, and then also given that you want to be able to communicate with someone that you're physical with, and the person you can communicate that you're physical with, you're going to have better intimacy with, because each is going to be able to say what they truly want out of those moments of physical intimacy a lot better.
Right. Now, some of the most popular shows today, you may have seen all these shows like Love is Blind, where you don't even see the person and you get engaged, or you're Married at First Sight, where you get married and then you take off the mask and see them. but only 20% or 10% of them make it. What do you think of that? Is that a good social experiment or not?
No, but I think that's mostly due to the phoniness of it. It's sort of a Disney problem where it creates a reality that does not actually correspond. It's simply just a simulation. So it's the Bourdieu problem of yes, the simulation does affect our reality, but the pure simulation you have, the more detached it is from that reality until it's able to feed in properly. So it's that issue of that everything's too staged and too like there's producers, there's cameras.
Yeah. So all that kind of takes away the real love, you think, or whatever they have, or the real passion from it.
Yeah, I think a better example is in real life. Most people talk about meeting their significant other by happenstance, right? Like they weren't looking for anything. It just kind of came to them, right? And anyone who has any romantic experience that has a friend who doesn't have a lot of romantic experience but really wants a partner, the best advice you can give them is just be yourself, go out into the world, put yourself out there, and don't even think about it. Because most times when you meet someone of significance to you, it'll be by happenstance.
Exactly. Now, some of people might say some of the stuff is nihilistic or even cynical, some of your takes. But I do see a lot of positive, I consider positive elements as well. Like you say, love is action, not necessarily feeling. And it doesn't come for those who wait. So there are people that are very passive and, hopefully I'll find someone that, they don't. But also love can also be giving love to others in a positive, like on service, helping people that need help. Do you talk about those kind of things? Helping the deserved.
Yeah, I think, going back very quickly, I do include the putting oneself out there when love comes by happenstance, because, you can't just like sit in your room and hope for these things to come. And I think that passion is a good directedness, and that passion could be put towards one's, music, one's care for their, family, so on and so forth, because you need those sparks to even get to the point of companionship. Passion is the practice of companionship, right? For someone to be able to have, a long relationship, or at least I think a good one, I think it is better for them to practice in the shorter term, right? In the same way that when you practice for, a basketball game, right? Like when, players are doing their practice games, they're not playing a full game of practice, right? They're doing spurts and jolts of it to see what the feeling is like. And then, they do other exercises in between. So myself, in terms of being nihilistic and pessimistic, I very much am absurdist in my philosophy, which is basically, I like to put Camus' understanding of absurdism as meaning of life agnosticism. So I have a lot of moments where, as a result of this, I can be very optimistic. I could be like smiling Sisyphus, or I could be like, oh God, I'm Sisyphus and I'm pushing a boulder. So, so I think it's good to straddle those two modes. And I think that
because you wrote something here. I don't know if you're being sarcastically funny or if you mean it. You say hopeless romantics are hopeful romantics. They hope for tender moments and sweet experiences. That sounds like a very sweet thing to say. Is that coming from you?
No sarcasm. I think that's honest.
You feel it. Okay. So that's that's almost like a feeler saying that.
Oh yeah, I'm very much a feeler, and I'm very emotionally driven. I wouldn't write poetry if it were otherwise.
Okay, so that is a very hopeful statement, about love, basically. So there's an optimistic statement. Through sexual attraction, love for another, otherness can emerge. They become them. But then another part of the book, you say, even if I have oneness and union, that would be horrible because it would destroy the otherness in the other person. There would not be that otherness. There would be a different otherness. Wouldn't there be a better otherness, perhaps, or a growth otherness if that happens?
No, because I think the problem that a lot of people do is they try to make others themselves, and they destroy something of the other person, right? Where it's, I'm reading Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar right now, and Brutus, his wife, talks about like, come on, we're one, we're merged together, like confide in, and it's one of those things where it's like, no, like each is their own independent person, and that's what makes them beautiful. And I think oftentimes in relationships where there's this attempt at unity removes the beauty. So as I mentioned the Sufis earlier, as much as I appreciate them, I think they're trying to, merge everything together often removes the beauty of individual things put aside. And I think, it's good to work with someone. It's good to be like in team and unison. So I'm not saying like, oh, that's right, to be completely independent of your partners, it's just more to say that, like, make sure that they preserve the things of themselves that made you passionate about them in the first place, and preserve the things that you are passionate about yourself that I'm sure were the reason that they were passionate.
So you don't lose
for
yourself
you.
in the person. Like that's called codependency, right? That you kind of
Yes.
like try to change that person and you lose your own identity.
Yes.
You do have an interesting story about the warrior king. He says, "If I conquer cities, I'll be happy." And then he meets a guy lying naked on the road who is actually smiling. And he said, "Why is that?" He says, "I don't need to conquer the stars because I just watch them shine, and that's beautiful."
Yes.
So just enjoying life, gratitude, is that kind of what you're saying there, and just being in the moment?
Yeah, I think, I think in that sort of regard, I think it just comes down to also a thing we had earlier, that the things that we often can most appreciate and most have passion for are those things we come across and don't need to necessarily go after and get. And it's also a very anti-conquering message of, making things one's own when they're not, because, I think, the naked man at the end, he's also, he's at himself, right? He's just completely, just presenting himself as himself, where, and just letting himself be within himself. Whereas the other person is, he's living up to an ambition, because there are multiple kings. There's the warrior king, who's the son of a mountain king, who also is a conqueror. So there's this, there's this artifice, of tradition also that's included in, which clearly the guy who's naked lying in the stars, I don't think he comes from a long line of naked people who lied licking the stars. I think it's just something that this individual genuinely enjoyed.
Right. Well, they said Diogenes was looking at something, and then Alexander the Great says, "I'll give you anything you want." He says, "Well, just move a little bit out of my way so I can enjoy the view." Kind of thing. So, and you're enjoying the beautifulness of the moment. Now, the other thing is, you talk about you can't force love, and if you recall the Song of Songs, Solomon talked about you can't make love come to you, right? You have to let it come when it comes. It's a very powerful force like that can sweep you away. Do you also agree with that part of it?
Yeah, 100%. Also, one of my favorite works, if not my favorite work of the Bible, is Ecclesiastes, which is also credited to Solomon, and it has those same sorts of vibes where life can sweep you at any moment. And I think love is a large aspect of life that can sweep you, but so can friendship, so can happiness, so can sadness. It's not to say that you don't have free will in these sort of situations, but I think a lot of these situations are very compatibilist, where there are factors that you cannot control and factors that you can control. But unfortunately, I think one that you cannot control is passion. It's hard. People stumble upon their passions. They don't just decide one day, oh, I'm going to be passionate about NASCAR racing. It's just not something that I don't think people can decide for themselves. They come across it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you also say love is fleeting, beautiful, and intense. Mm-hmm. But how about the idea that love is also a deep understanding of another, which takes time and, is a kind of a gradual, depth of understanding the person. Do you see that as being a part of love, is to fully connect with that person?
No, I see that as the realm of care and companionship. Is when you get deep into it. So I think passion is when you have that initial sort of knowledge, right? So if I'm passionate about hiking, right, the people who are typically passionate about hiking aren't the expert hikers. By no means am I an expert hiker. I'm passionate about it. I love to do 16-mile hikes and that sort of stuff, but by no means could I competitively hike. By no means could I do the Arizona Trail or the Appalachian Trail. So it's more along the lines of that I am passionate in the sense that I am past the point of being a novice. I could say that I'm an amateur, but by no means am I a professional at having a deep understanding of things. And I think the realm of love is not where you have the deep understanding. I think the realm of love is the springboard that either launches you into that realm of care and companionship, or it's when you just jump off the ship. Because a lot of people do that. They get really passionate about something for a couple of months, and then they realize that when the love goes away, they're like, maybe I'm not so interested in model trains or whatever it may be.
So you're equating love kind of as passion, you're saying, the excitement, the joy and all that. Is that what you're kind of saying? And the other stuff, caring, is more of a softer, deeper kind of thing over time.
Yes.
That flows with it. But you don't call that love per se. You call it something else, caring.
Yes, I call it care or companionship, yes.
Interesting. Yeah, because one of my students was a woman from India, I believe, and she was middle-aged, and she says, I had an arranged marriage. I was very happy with an arranged marriage, and then my husband died. But one thing that my husband told me is when he was young, his mother said this: if you want to make love with one woman, make love with many women. But if you want to make love with many women, make love with one woman.
Yes.
I thought, what does that mean? Well, the idea that you make love with many women, but you're picking the kind of the same type that you like. So it's kind of the same person. You don't really get to know them. You could call it flings, but if you make love with one woman many times, you go deep within the layers of who that is, and she can be multiple people.
Yeah.
But how would you classify that? Because that may go a little bit against the fling idea.
Well, yeah, but I think that's part of that. No, I think it's exactly it. I think you get passionate about the otherness of somebody else. So like that's why I said earlier you can have a fling with like a marriage or even one person.
So it's like keeping it exciting, like maybe going somewhere different or do something different.
But it's even also appreciating the otherness of somebody, right? Like one of the things that you can do is like if you sustain passion, you can learn something about somebody else. I mean, there's that song, do you like pina coladas? And they both find out at the end that, oh yeah, we like pina coladas and like being in caves and stuff. Like obviously that song's awful because both are trying to cheat at each other. But the point being it's a end idea where both figure out something other about the other. Right. And I think
we didn't know that we had this in common, but we found out in this strange way.
Yes.
So you're saying that's the part of the excitement is to keep learning more about the person?
Yes.
And that is passion, or is that love, or is that
I think that's definitely passion and love, yes.
Okay, good. Interesting. Now, the other thing that you talk about is self-love. In Love University, we say love yourself, others, and the higher nature. So here we talk about self-love, and you said that self-love may not be good because it doesn't allow for selfhood and it replaces self-care. Can you define that?
Oh, that's too soft. No. I think self-love is an evil in a sense. If we can call anything an evil in the sense of towards oneself, right? I think the issue with self-love is that it others oneself and it creates an object to be analyzed and to be corrected, but does not actually assist oneself. So the idea is
like, philosophical. Put it down to layman terms. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So when I self-love, I don't actually direct it at myself. I create a figure of myself, an imagination of myself, and I create an ideal of myself. And I direct my energy towards that as opposed to myself. I think that's the problem that occurs in self-love.
Well, let's break it down. Self-care is basically, taking a massage or exercising, stuff like that, and eating healthy. Is that self-care in your mind?
I think self-care could include
spiritual practice, meditation.
I think self-care, yeah, those were the other good examples. I think self-care is actual examination. So the difference between, I think, self-love and self-care is looking at yourself and seeing the actual cuts you have on yourself and like actually bandaging yourself and etc. Whereas self-love would be how does this hypothetical individual put themselves in situations where they will avoid the cuts and the bandages and the bleeding? And it's like, no, because ultimately when we get down to it, you have to assess yourself in the conditions that you're actually in, and self-love creates an imaginary version of you that is not actually the case, that gets all the good feelings and all the positive stuff directed onto it and leaves the negative shell of yourself. Whereas in self-care, you can look at yourself for as you actually are, the goods, the perceived goods, bads, and
is it like like say the overprotective mother that coddles a kid too much and doesn't let them explore and maybe fall and learn from that? And they did studies on that. Goldman, have you heard of Emotional Intelligence, the book? And all that?
Yes.
So he has studies on that usually the kids that are shy and timid are the ones that had the overprotective mothers because they never had a chance to go and explore the environment and fall and learn from that. So is that kind of what you're saying about self-love? Is not really letting yourself experience even the problems of life and then solve them, or even your own flaws, as you said?
Yeah, that doesn't hurt, but it's more along the lines that I think self-love is closer to
not narcissistic. That's a whole different thing. We're not talking about that, right? Aggrandizement kind of thing.
No, actually, we are talking about something close to that. It's actually more of the Kohut issue than it is than the issue of the the overprotecting mother, because it's more in self-love. You create a Photoshop of yourself, right? You create this like version of yourself that you wish to be and wish to come to be like, right? Like that's what self-love tends to do, because it creates an otherness, right? It others yourself and creates a filtered version of yourself, whereas in self-care is actual pointed assessment at yourself, right? If love is passion directed at something other, if you then self-love, then you then tend to other yourself and create yourself as something else to be passionate over. And when we have passion for things, we also limit their capacities because there's only so much information you can gather in that initial ooh, ah, sort of moment.
Well, you're a fascinating gentleman. There's a lot here that I'm learning. And I think you're channeling. I mean, I don't know if you believe in the world of channeling or, some higher information. Do you believe in a spiritual nature? Do you have any paths that you follow?
So I'm personally agnostic. I've had a lot of religiosity in my background. I've also studied, Catholic, of course, being Cuban, but I've also helped assist the introduction to world religions class at the University of New Mexico. So I've done religious scholarship, but for me, I'm neither for nor against religiosity or spirituality. It's just for me personally, I kind of am quite skeptical, but not against.
Right. But a lot of people say that the real basis of religion and spirituality is this thing called love, but from a higher nature, loving others, helping others. Now, given all the stuff you've written, is there a space for that in you in terms of being compassionate, being empathetic, and giving loving energy to others?
Yeah, I think part of my work is to assist with that, because I think the problem that a lot of people have is that they feel they can't love unless they're all in, right? This idea that like, oh, in order to love, I have to be all in. And I think, as I understand it, it's that love does not have to be an all in. I mean,
helping a homeless person. I mean, not just romantic, but helping somebody that needs help. Your neighbor is crying, and you listen to the neighbor for an hour, even though you're busy. Do you believe in that kind of stuff?
Of course. I think because I think the problem is that a lot of people get caught up is like, why help the neighbor in the first place if I can't fix the neighbor's problems? Why help out this one homeless guy if I can't solve homelessness? I think a lot of people get caught up in that trap. And what I'm offering more so is that it is okay to do things on a smaller scale and on a
micro
smaller
compassion,
scale.
shall we say, like the elements of it.
Yes.
And that would be just a little step toward. Do you believe in society as a whole, being loving or caring to each other?
Yeah, I mean, I'm skeptical of certain aspects of sort of herd ideas of compassion and equality and etc. But ultimately, my tendencies do still lean towards at least a general kumbaya in a sense, not necessarily that we're all going to be equals, or that that there is no room for violence or any there may be room for certain things that aren't necessarily within the Christian morality, but nonetheless, I think a general sense of care and compassion I personally view as positives, because we've kind of all been thrown into life experience and we're all kind of trying to figure stuff out. And I think ultimately there is reasonable reason to not be to put it simply, a dick to others.
So Anthony, are you an INFP on the Myers-Briggs by any chance? Have you ever taken that test?
No, I am an ENTP.
Oh, really? Okay. So the thinking, but you said you're a feeler. Is that come out underlying the thinking? Because you said you're a key. Is that
yes. It comes out. So I'm very extroverted. I very much am energized.
So ENFP. So I call it a social philosopher is what I call it. But I mean, if you're the F, but you're not. You're saying you're more the ENTP.
T. Yeah.
So you're more of a logical thinking person. You're saying.
Surprisingly, yeah. Even though I'm awful at symbolic logic and syllogistic thinking, nonetheless, this is where my Myers-Briggs takes me.
So I wrote about love types on compatibility and the Myers-Briggs. So I call it the innovator, the ENTP. So they can have great ideas, inventions. They can go bankrupt or make $1 million the next day or something like that. Does that sound like you? Are you kind of like
for other reasons? But yes, including the whole personality thing. Yes.
And what are you excited about, Anthony? Where can people hear more about you? Are there any projects you're working on, or what's going on with you?
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, I'm focusing on the idea of what allows something to be complete versus incomplete. And I'm doing that towards natural completionism. So, this tendency that people have to go to every national park. So I really want to use that as a springboard to critique notions of completionism and to understand what makes something complete and incomplete. But that project, I think, is going to be slower going, and I'm going to format it very differently.
So it's a book. You're writing a book about that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm someone who, I publish random poems and, essays all the time. But yeah, for me personally, I mean, the next, big project right now that I have is moving with my partner to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I'll be teaching composition a class at Oklahoma State for a bit, and we'll see what happens from there.
Okay, you don't know if it's a fling yet. It could be something longer, or you don't know.
It could be, and the fact that that they're coming with me to Oklahoma
is it okay to talk about it? They might get mad at you or something.
No. Okay, we're very chill in these
cool with it?
sorts of. Yeah, we have a very very strong trust in each other, and
so philosophy is your thing, right? You got the master's. You want to be a teacher, professor, stuff like that. Write books and all that.
Yeah, I think on my own hand, I don't know if I'm going to do a doctorate in philosophy. As of right now, I'm in a program for a creative writing MFA. So for me in general, I more want to be a academic of the humanities and write within the humanities as a broader subject. So, I don't know necessarily if I'm going to shift away from the creative writing MFA towards another aspect of the humanities, but nonetheless, I am very humanities based because I'm very interested in the manner and approach at which humanity approaches itself and perceives itself and matters of it.
Philosophy made easy, right, for the average person, or made interesting, I guess it would be nice.
I don't know if I make it easy or difficult. I think or
interesting at least, or fun.
I think I could do either. I'm in this weird space where I have these aphorisms and sections that are very pop philosophy, and then I have these other very technical moments. So
a little Tupac over here, a little Descartes over there, right, or something.
Yes, I like that. Yeah, more for me, it would be more Kendrick Lamar and Nietzsche. But yes,
there you go.
I like. Okay. Yeah, those would be my.
What's your website and where people get a hold of your books and things like that?
So my stuff can be found on Amazon. I can also be most frequently seen on Medium. And I don't really have a website. I'm not very much a social media person, but you could find both my works on Amazon by their title. That would be The Assumption of Death and Flings on Flings. And then I publish on Medium quite often under my full name, which is Anthony David Vernon.
Fantastic. Well, it's been wonderful having you on the show, Anthony. I'd love to have you back.
Wonderful talking to you.
You've been talking about current events. I can ask you certain things, right, about current events. And what do you think?
Oh yeah, sure. I hope to be young enough to be contributing to current events. I hope
philosophical point of view, right, or something.
Yeah, don't have too many gray hairs for that. Hopefully.
Exactly. All right, Anthony, it's been a pleasure. This is Dr. Alex Avila, and I hope to have Anthony back again, and we'll continue with Love University, loving yourself, others, and a higher nature. We learned some interesting things, and we're going to keep growing and improving. It's time to put away your notebooks, your iPads, your phones. Love University is now dismissed. Dr. Avila. That was a fascinating interview with a young man that talked a lot about philosophy, Anthony David Vernon, but also in a very practical way. Now, he was a little bit, you could say, almost cynical, nihilistic in a certain way, but also underlying, there's a lot of hope there as well. I think he's more compassionate than he's letting on, perhaps, more loving, as we define it. But it is good to question, not just take love as a sugar-coated thing that we read in magazines or newspapers, or we say, I love you, but to really go deeper. What does it really mean? Is it a deep understanding of another? Is it caring? Is it compassion? Is it empathy? There are many components, sexual, romantic components, companionate components. But the key is to discover who you are inside, your authenticity, to love yourself in an authentic way, like Anthony was saying. Take care of yourself, but also love others and extend that love energy outward. And I do believe in love without expectations, where you give it out, it comes back manyfold, and it really helps you become the best you can be. So if you want to be on a future show, or if you comment on today's show, you can reach us at 310-226-8090. Write to us at loveuniversalilove@gmail.com. Visit us at loveuniversity.love. You can download the podcast on Podbean, Spotify, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Love Letter U Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Love Letter U Podcast. Until next time, this is Dr. Alex Avila. Put away your notebooks, your iPads, your phones. Class is now dismissed.